I've become so embittered with my whole experience of being here, so I no longer want to stay in academia, I no longer want to stay in science.
I just finished my PhD and started to do a postdoc in the same lab.
I'm just finishing the first year of my PhD.
And now I'm doing another postdoc.
I'm doing a PhD. Should I be more specific?
I'm about to finish my first year as a PhD.
I'm not very labby, if that makes sense. I'm an ideas person, not a practical person. But yes, I work in a lab.
I've been on my final year for 2.5 years now, hoping to finish in the next few weeks. I was quite enthusiastic when I came here. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this cool PhD, it's going to be at Cambridge, I'm going to publish, do cool science and learn things. I was, planning to stay in academic research.
Overall, it's a fairly chatty lab where we are quite social.
Let's just say that the atmosphere in the office doesn't really push towards speaking with others. It's my 9th month, and I can say I'm friends with some of them, but not everyone.
After I changed project and ceased to work with the initial project I was assigned to work in, this guy stepped in, saying that he was concerned about me and he wanted to help me. We managed to get a good amount of work done together, but I'm starting to think that he had ulterior motives. He wanted his name in my poster, and he was known of getting students to do his stuff for him. During the time we were working together, he sat me down after we had all gone for afternoon tea, and he was like, listen, I think you need to stop expecting people to be nice to you and get all upset when people aren't nice to you, because as a PhD student here, you're at the bottom of the food chain and you should just man up and deal with it. It's not like I was expecting preferential treatment. I never went to someone and asked them to do my work for me.
A lot of what I have seen hasn't been subtle. In fact, it's the sheer boldness that shocks me. It's just accepted because there is supposed to be a higher purpose, the knowledge, and that excuses a lot of the stuff in the eyes of the bosses, because this person, they might be a complete horrible person, but they are doing science, they are progressing.
I was giving a presentation a couple of years ago to my lab, which was meant to be a mock presentation for a talk that I was meant to be giving later on that year. I was stopped about halfway through by the senior postdoc, and he went off for 5 to 10 minute rant on how I was a waste of scientific talent and funding because I wasn't taking my PhD seriously enough and I was never going to finish, and how I was presenting the same stuff over and over again in my talks. The ironic thing is that this entire rant started with me mentioning that I was having some issues with a particular experiment and turning to him to say, you've succeeded in doing something similar, so maybe we can have a chat at some point. And he was like, don't come to me for help because you're a waste of lab resources and stuff. If you were that concerned about my progress, that I wasn't taking things seriously enough, or that I'm not going to graduate, then maybe you should come and offer some help. Or if you thought that I needed someone to come talk to me abruptly to wake me up or whatever, if that was the tough love approach that he was going for, he had so many opportunities to take me aside in the corridor or in his office, on the lab, that I found it quite strange that he chose to do this while I was standing up in a podium in front of 30 people. My supervisor just sat there and didn't say anything. The whole room was just silent. The whole room was just silent. That's an example of the kind of stuff I've had happen in my lab, which has really made me hate being there, to the point where now that I'm doing my last minute experiments to get out of here, I'm going in after dinner time because I don't want to go there when people will be there, which is not healthy, but it's the only way I can get any work done because I just get really stressed out. It's actually even affecting my health. I've had to intermit for 6 months because I was so depressed of the whole situation that I wasn't even eating. And now I genuinely get heart palpitations and start sweating if I have to go in during the day.
He is ignoring me. He absolutely ignores me, to the level that when I say good morning to him, he just looks at me irritated and doesn't say anything. To some people, he is actively denying something, but he is passively denying me by ignoring me. My strategy is to keep friendly with him, and indeed yesterday I got a reply from him and actually he showed me something that I could use. But this is the first positive experience with him that I've had in 8 months.
There was this girl who became a bit of a bully. She was a research assistant. Sometimes she decided that she didn't like you because you had done something that had undermined her, and you wouldn't know what it was, but then she had just stopped talking to you. The avoidance was not just passive, it was active. She did this to a PhD student. The PhD student was miserable, and her PhD was very much affected by it, and nothing was really done. And I was trying to get the supervisors to do their jobs, to manage the situation, because they were trying to ignore it. And eventually they managed to manage the situation by removing the PhD student to another lab, which, you have a member of staff essentially bullying a student.
I've been really lucky. I applied without knowing my supervisor, and now that I have started knowing him, he is a really, really nice guy. He's extremely available. He is really friendly and wants to know me beyond my work. I mean, it's still a prof-student relation, but I don't feel like I'm inferior to him. He still acknowledges my opinion on research, and he still wants me to have my own initiative on how to do it. It's really a mentorship.
My worst internship was with a female supervisor. I had the feeling that she was continuously throwing subtle weapons at me with words, and I really suffered from that, to the extent that I had nausea and vomited at the lab.
And then we tried having regular meetings, just the two of us. The idea was that he'd look what I'd done in the past week or two and give me feedback. But he wouldn't really give me short-term goals, be like, do this massive experiment. And then he started scheduling meetings and not showing up for them.
There is a postdoc in my old lab, who has left now, who was hired in odd circumstances, was a known plagiarist, but that was brushed under the carpet. Very good at getting people to help them, and he was hired to do the job with the knowledge that he didn't have those skills, but that he will get the job done, and that was the most important thing. At the end of my PhD, I was going through... Basically, my dad died, and he wasn't dead yet, but he was dying. And I told my boss about this, who told my other supervisor. And my other supervisor decided I wouldn't be able to finish the work for the paper because I was prioritising my thesis, and I was clearly under a lot of strain. So they asked the postdoc to finish my work, and just told me, fairly perfunctorily, that, thanks for what you've done, but you've really just got the bare bones of it, and we need to flesh it out now. And so they're going to do that. You're not going to do that. You're just going to need to finish your thesis. You can perceive that, perhaps it's just the way I'm saying it. Maybe they were just being really supportive, taking the pressure off. But no, what he actually was doing was saying, this postdoc is going to be the first author on this manuscript. And I had already spent 3 years on this. So I had worked very hard on a failing project, finally got it round to something really quite interesting, and it was being taken from me by a not very nice person, given to someone with very few skills, who plagiarised.
These people have become heads of labs, not because they're good at managing people, but because they're good scientists. You could have won the bloody Nobel Prize. That doesn't suddenly mean that you're good at solving interpersonal issues in your lab. It's such a dynamic environment because it involves people, and people are complex, and you need your boss to know how to deal with the complexities of being human.
It's like evolution in a way. The hierarchy is very selective, and it selects people who are very ruthless and good at getting results. Not necessarily good at getting the right results, but good at producing papers that pass the peer review process. There maybe are group leaders who are nice and good at managing people, but generally speaking, you don't get to be a professor unless you've been very successful. The selective thing is persistence. It's not really about ability, because you get to a certain level, everybody's good. And you know the competitive nature of it. The only thing that gives you an edge is ruthlessness. So that's how they are selected. It doesn't suit their aims. The science is still being done and progress is still being made. They don't care what's going on with scientists because the important thing is science.
If I'm brutally honest, it's a certain numbers game. So even though they need to care about these things, maybe in practice they don't too much, because they know that the worst case scenario is you will leave and another person will take your place. As long as there are a certain amount of papers coming out of that group of students at all times, and a couple of nature papers from the top 5% or the top 10%, it's fine.
I have quite a good relationship with my supervisor. Whenever I have ideas, or whenever he has ideas, we just talk a lot to each other and do brainstorming, which is probably because he wants to do the best, as this is his first time being a PI, and because we are a small group.
My friend and me always advise people to go for a young PI, because they might work you to the ground, but you get a really good PhD out of it, because it is at their interest for you to do really well.
It's a very close-knit group with a lot of support because this PI, right, his entire career depends on the success of these 6 people that he is controlling. So he is very much involved.
Collaboration is very important. And yes, toxic people make that harder. But I was always able to collaborate with those things that I mentioned.
I think that quite often the best ideas, the best solutions to problems, come from discussing with people who might see something from a different perspective to you. Because you can sit and stare at a problem and bang your head against the wall to solve it for ages. And you might not be thinking of it from a certain perspective. And sharing that data set to someone who sees it slightly differently from you might just be able to instantly be like, oh, have you done this?
My department has always been mostly men. Maybe 20% women, 80% men. But like in the office next door, there's one woman and 6 or 7 guys. I haven't really discussed sexism with women in the lab. It never really came up, so I can't really say.
I think there's a stigma to it. It is not seen as a very feminine degree to work in my field. I think that's changing. I think in the previous generation it must have been very difficult for women.
Just because it hasn't happened to you directly doesn't mean it doesn't happen, which is unfortunately the culture that is widespread when we talk about gender equality in all fields. But I think it was especially motivated by a few members of my lab still thinking that being catcalled and being appraised as sexual object, it's still praise. A couple of them took the idea, if it's not hurting your chances, what's the problem? I think it's coming from very, very different perspective on the issue and not having experienced it. So there's a part of when you sort of think, oh, well, okay, perhaps it hasn't happened to you, but it has happened to someone you know.
I mean, I have heard stories where PIs have only picked female postdocs because the PIs, and I'm not sure if this is true, but the PIs have been intimidated about having other male senior postdocs in the group, and so I personally haven't come across any sexism in my department.
Equally, for a couple, well, not all, but a couple of male members of the lab, it is a question of privilege. A lot of them are still working through the process of understanding their privilege, which is fair. I do understand that is a process everybody has to go through, but quite a few are still working through understanding. They haven't experienced it, therefore it doesn't exist, but that's really not the case. As a man, there are a lot of things that you don't experience, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or that you shouldn't take it seriously.
I mean, like I said, a lot of these guys don't necessarily have the best social skills, so what they think might be playful banter or flirtation is actually kind of offensive. The postdoc that had a go with me at the presentation, the senior postdoc, and the students that he was working closely with at the time used to accidentally on purpose knock things over to make this one other student bend over and pick it up, because she was known for wearing thongs and low-cut trousers, and they used to make bets on what particular colour her thongs were at that particular day.
The thing that really upsets me about it, perhaps this is naive, is that it should be about the ideas and the progress towards understanding, not publication. And that goes more against women than men because of the sacrifices that the men can make when compared to women. They can still have a family and, be... It's not like you can't have a family, but it is a lot harder. Hiring decisions impinge on that. The main reason why I'm leaving science is that I don't think it will make me happy. I could do it. I believe that I could do it. I can bring a lot of extra to a lab, and I think I could be a good PI because I can manage people, but I'm not selected because I'm not getting millions of publications. I'm getting some, mainly by collaboration, of course. But while I could do it, I don't think I would be happy, because the people I would be working with are people who are selected on characteristics that I don't admire, and I would be selected on those characteristics. Once you get there, once you get to the top of the ivory tower, then you can afford to be a nicer person. But maybe by that point you have changed, and you're not a nice person anymore. I don't want to become that. The reason why a lot of people stay in science depends on how often you get it, but there is this thing called Golden Lab. I've had 2 Golden Labs. Everyone got on. We would go out after work. It was very friendly. It was quite productive because everybody was happy and motivated. And if anyone got down because of their experiments, there was more support. That's the thing. If you are in a golden lab, you get more support.
During my undergrad, I did a summer placement with one of my lecturers, and I had a really great time working with him. He was always there in his office, and you could drop in and be like, hey, can I just ask you something? I don't know what I did wrong, or can you just come and run something with me? He was always available. If he wasn't, there were always a couple of postdocs around, lots of banter. Once a week he would order a pizza for all of us.
It's all about what sacrifice you can make. And I can't make those sacrifices. My family, my friends, they are really important to me. I can't get an equivalent level, or slightly better sacrifice, without really changing myself, or maybe harming something in myself. I'm saying I can't, but I could, but I don't think it would be a good idea. I think I choose life, not a job.
The advice that I give to everyone is pick the lab, not the project. If you're in a lab where you're taken care of as a student and you have a PI who will be available to you, I think that's much more important than the actual project you're working on. Whereas when you're in a lab where no one gives a shit and people are actively unpleasant to work with, that will completely mess up your PhD experience.
And you have to decide, most careers at some point, do I want to be this? Is this who I want to be? Because, okay, it might just be professional, but it may leak into your personal life as well. You know, you can't help if you learned a certain amount of manipulation to get what you want to get. So maybe to use that in your personal life, to your advantage. A bit scary. Do you want to be that person? Nice people will say no and go, actually, I'd rather do something less high octane with nicer people. Because generally what most people want, yeah, they want an interesting job, but what's more important is that they want a friendly environment. I wouldn't say don't do it. I'm glad I did it. I've been unlucky. So in terms of advice, don't get sucked in. Meaning, do get sucked in the science, get focused, roll about in it, become the expert, love it, enjoy the freedom, because that's the last time you're going to have research freedom until you become a PI, if you do. And even then it'll depend on what they give you money for. So you're not really free. The main thing is, don't get sucked in terms of don't lose your perspective. I spent a lot of time by the mountains or by the sea because they're big. And the lab magnifies things, makes very small and petty things seem very important, and people get very emotional and angry and upset about things that aren't that important. And if you can just keep a level head and try to see things from other people's point of view, I think it's better. So my advice would be the emotional kind, about the interactions, because it's the interactions that make or break it. The rest is all down to luck.